if that notion of, okay, just be quiet, repress your feelings and don't talk about it and be emotionless doesn't come from God, then you have to ask yourself, where does that come from?
Yeah.
And I would submit to you that comes from the evil one, that comes from the enemy who wants to rob, steal, kill, and destroy. He wants to damage you, and he wants to damage people. And the great way to do that is to get men to believe this narrative that I'm being the best man possible if I have the least amount of emotions as possible. And that's simply not true.
Right. My name is Caroline, and I'm a counselor.
My name is Brett, and I'm a pastor.
And together, we're tackling difficult topics from a biblical perspective.
Welcome to There We Said It. Hey, we are back with There We Said It. Pastor Brett Dode here with Carolyn Howard, biblical counselor and friend. And it's good to be back, my sister.
We missed you last week.
Yeah,
Welcome back.
Thank you. It's good to be back as my family and I traverse a deep valley right now. Just thankful for the love, support, kindness. And it ties in really well to our topic of the podcast today, which I had to kind of shake my head and say, God, don't know how I feel about this, but our topic today is feelings.
Yay!
And I have a lot of feelings, and so do you. So we are going to talk about it from a biblical perspective today in a way that we think is winsome, and we hope helps bring you freedom and freedom to other people that you love. So let's dig into this. Caroline, tell us about feelings. What are they? Everyone probably thinks they know this answer, but this is one of those things where it's nice to talk to someone who's a professional in the human health industry, mental health. What is a feeling?
I thought you were going to say professional in feelings because I'm a woman.
Yeah. Oh, come on now. We don't want to lose half of the viewership here. No way. Ladies, your feelings are validated, and as a man, I believe that it's true. So.
Thank you. Yes. We all appreciate that.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Because it's true. I mean, women feel the feels, and that's what I say. And it's, you got all those little sayings. You gotta feel it to heal it. And it's so important. And I love feelings, and this topic excites me. And I hope that by the end of this, it will make everybody excited because we all have feelings. Yeah. Whether we want to admit it or not. Some people want to believe they're emotionless, and that's not the case. The case is like, no, you've done a really good job at learning how to shove them deep down inside. And there's still something. No one can be feelingless. Sure. So if you're shoving it deep down inside, it reminds me of those cans with the snakes in them. Oh, yeah. And you shove them in there and you pop off the top. Well, that's all you're doing, right? You're shoving the snakes into the can. And eventually that lid is going to pop off and your emotions and feelings are going to come out if you don't deal with them.
In a healthy or unhealthy way.
Oh, more than likely, if you're not dealing with them, it'll be unhealthy. Okay.
Yeah. So that's kind of the prognosis. If your feelings aren't getting dealt with in a healthy way, in a timely manner, right? I mean, that's kind of a continuum. What's timely to one might not be exactly timely for another. Exactly. However, the goal is the same, that to deal with our feelings and to process them, the highs and lows, we need to have some tools to be able to do that. Yep. And I think a lot of people don't have those tools or never were really introduced to those tools.
Right. Because there are so many emotions. It's not just like there's a few, I'm happy, sad, I'm angry, and that's it. Right. There's like an array of them. So today we're going to talk a lot about our beautiful feelings wheel.
I know about this wheel.
You do know about this wheel.
I do.
Because if you've ever been in my office, you know about this wheel.
For those who are watching us on YouTube or via video, this is the blessed feelings wheel.
It's
and
so pretty.
It is color coded. It's very lovely.
It's so pretty.
And it just so side story, right? If you didn't catch our first episode, the genesis of Caroline's relationship and with me is that she was my counselor for a number of sessions as I was working through different feelings and things and really trying to be proactive to put my teaching and preaching into practice, which is to own my mental health and to take proactive steps to be healthier. And so I did. That's how I got to know Caroline. Yeah. And I think it was maybe like session 3 or 4 that you gave this to me.
I waited that long.
Probably good that I think you kind of had a sense. It's probably not great to drop the wheel on Brett on session 1 or 2.
Not everybody gets it on session 1. It's usually like session 2 or 3.
I think it was like 3 or so.
Depends on where you're at.
And you gave this to me. And I remember I brought this home and I did not make fun of this because I think there is actually really helpful things on here because words matter. Words matter. And so when people say, well, I'm angry. Okay. Yeah. Well, there's like 8 different words that flow out of anger from let down, humiliated, bitter, mad, aggressive, frustrated, distant, or critical. So, okay, I'm mad, but which one of those defines you? Well,
Right.
I feel bitter, okay? Is it because you're indignant or because you feel violated? It just starts asking questions that are
Right.
super smart, and these are the questions people don't ask. They say, I'm mad,
Yeah.
right? So this is a tool that I put on my fridge. It's still on the fridge.
Yay.
We use it.
Yes.
I will say that I don't use it as much now, only because I've learned to find these words in my own being,
And
so
that's the whole thing.
It taught me.
Yeah,
I
that's
don't-
the whole thing. Is eventually like you're not gonna have to rely on this wheel. So for those who are listening and can't see, the wheel is literally it's a circle, a middle circle, I should say a center circle, a middle circle, and an outer circle, and they're all color coded.
Yes.
With the emotions or feelings that correspond with that middle circle.
Yes.
So why there's 3 circles is because the ones in the very center, fearful, angry, disgusted, sad, happy, surprised, we call those primary emotions.
Yeah. Core emotions, right?
Those come out first. I look at those emotions as like, I always say like, they're like suppressing emotions, or they want to hide what we're really feeling. So imagine like, I think of this as like a crazy person in a big crowd, and they're jumping up and down because they don't want you to see what's behind them. Right? So they're distracting you.
I see.
Their arms are shaking, they're jumping, they're like, woohoo. And so you can't see that emotion, what's real behind them. And so that's how I look at those center emotions for. So what you want to do is you want to start in those center emotions. And like you just did, you walk your way out to that outer circle to identify the actual feeling. And one of the main reasons this is so important, and this is going to get into like the science brain stuff, which I love, is we feel our emotions are part of our amygdala, which is like our emotion part of our brain. It's this little almond shaped thing in our brain. It is also a non-thinking part of our brain. So it just holds those emotions and doesn't think about them. When you stop to identify what you're really feeling, you are now getting your prefrontal cortex online, which is a thinking part of your brain. And so you're activating more of your brain, and you're able to more control that emotion, get it to where it needs to be, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Got you. Yeah. For those listening, Caroline referenced the amygdala being the size of an almond. For all the Ripon residents, I would like to say she meant almond. And please don't unsubscribe. We know how deep these things and feelings are.
Wait. I heard that it's almond when it's on the tree and almond when it's off the tree.
It's an almond in Ripon all the time, whether it's on the tree or not on the tree, and it just is what it is. But I can tell you how the L got lost. There's a funny joke. They shook the L out of it.
Yeah.
So that's
But that
Pastor
doesn't
funny,
happen
I
until
guess.
it's off the tree.
Well, I'll let you take that up with the farmers. They're passionate about these things.
Okay.
So, the truth of the matter is that this wheel is really about self-awareness.
Yep.
That's really what it comes down to. It comes down to a simple question that I think the most emotionally mature people I ever meet all have this question in their heart in some way, shape, or form. What am I feeling right now and why?
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So not just like I'm mad. Okay. Why am I mad? Like what happened? Did I feel slighted? Do I feel uncomfortable? Do I feel embarrassed? And so it's coming out as anger. What am I feeling right now and why is a question that I've used for myself over the last probably decade since I first got awareness of it. No one had ever told me that before, And so what am I feeling right now and why has been a great question to run my emotions through that I think have saved me a lot of conflict.
Yeah.
And it's probably saved me a lot of gross misinterpretations of what actually just happened in me or around me. And so maybe talk a little bit about that. Like, how can people own that philosophy rather than our feelings are real, right?
Yeah.
But not every feeling's true. We talked about it in the boundaries session, which I think is paramount, right? Your feelings are real. Doesn't mean they're true. I mean, you are mad. Doesn't mean you have the right to be.
Yeah. So here's like there's like 3 steps to it, right? We identify the feeling. What am I feeling? And then we process the feeling. Like, why am I feeling this way?
Okay.
What has me feeling this way? And, like I usually tell people, like, journal it out if you can. If not, it's like a sentence or 2 in your head. Why am I feeling this way? It's never a person. A person doesn't make you feel something.
Okay.
Their actions, their words can make you feel something, but it's not that person. So I can't just be like, well, I'm mad at Brett.
Okay.
And because Brett's Brett.
Yeah.
There has to be something underlying there. Well, what did Brett do? Why did he do it?
Yeah. Why did I take offense from it?
Right. Exactly. And then we want to check the script. And this is where I feel like the biblical part of it comes in. We want to check the script on those two sentences. Is this truth or is this a lie? So think about some guy cuts you off in traffic.
Yep.
And you're angry, right? You work through here and you go to, I'm angry, I feel aggressive, I feel hostile. Why do I feel hostile? Because this guy doesn't care about me. He just cut me off and it's like I don't even exist. Okay, well, if you stop and you check that script, is this truth? Does this guy really not care about me?
Right.
Well, no.
He doesn't know me.
He doesn't know you.
Yeah.
He could be like, my daughter would always say, maybe he's on his way to the hospital because his wife is having a baby. I'm like, you're right. I mean, there could be a million reasons why he cut you off.
Yeah.
But you have allowed a lie to enter into your brain to now make you feel something that you don't need to feel.
Sure. Yeah. And it feels like justification for the feeling in some way, shape, or form too.
Right. And that goes back to biblical stuff of take your thoughts captive, because that's what God says, right?
Yeah.
We take our thoughts captive. He doesn't say take our feelings captive.
Yeah.
Because the thought comes first.
Yeah, it does.
It's this whole cycle of thinking, feeling, acting, thinking, feeling, acting. And it starts like in your thoughts.
Sure.
So what we think affects how we feel and act.
Yeah. Amen. So we're going to link this feelings wheel in the description for the podcast if you think it's helpful. I can tell you, like I said, I use this the most now that I've become educated by it with my kids.
Oh, yeah.
And I have a 4-year-old who, my daughter, and she can't read, but she knows her colors.
Yeah.
And so we've pointed out which colors, like yellow is happy and on this, blue is sad. And so when she's having one of her moments, we'll say, Jovi, go to the fridge and tell us what color you're feeling right now. And she'll say, oh, I'm feeling yellow, you know, and we're like, okay, why are you happy?
Yeah.
And she'll say, oh, because, I got to play with my dolls today and that just was something I wanted to do. Great. Is there anything else that, as you kind of just, and she's like, yeah, she doesn't have the word gratitude and she doesn't know the word thankful, but in her own way, I think she's trying to communicate that she's happy because she gets to do these things she enjoys with people she loves. And that the outcome is that she's grateful. She's thankful.
Which then that you can teach her that verbiage and that word to know how to identify that feeling.
Yeah. And embrace it.
Yeah.
And love it and feel it. In the same way with, the opposite end of the spectrum, sad or frustrated or angry. Those feelings come up a lot too in our house. She has 3 brothers, God bless her, right? I mean, there's things that happen to this girl that she has real feelings about. Yeah. And so we have to work that through. So it's a very helpful resource, not just for kids and adults, but I really use it the most in my house for kids, and it's been a great tool. So thanks for sharing that.
Every time I give to someone, I say, this is a gift that you can give to your kids, which was then actually be a gift to their spouses. If you can raise kids who can identify and process emotions. And I love that you're using the actual wheel. And as she's 4, you're building up to the language of the big words.
Yeah.
And that's what I will tell my clients, like, teach your kids what these big words mean. They need to know what the big word emotions mean.
Yeah,
It'll take time. I mean, when I first started on this, I had to look up some of these words because I'm like, I don't really know what that emotion
I don't use these words all the time.
Is. Yeah. And so like I use this with my son. He's not so happy about it. He calls it the wheel from hell. So he doesn't see the colors as pretty things.
He sees it as a wheel that calls him to self-examine, and that takes work.
Exactly.
And who wants to do that?
And it takes about a half an hour of him and I going back and forth, pushing this across the table, and finally he's just like, fine, Mom. And
I'll do it. I'm yellow.
And he'll do it, and then he's all happy afterwards, and I'm sitting there like, see, you should have done it a half hour ago. But it really is. And I always tell people, make copies of it, take a picture of it, and have it on your phone, because they'll be like, well, I was out and about, but I couldn't figure it out. Well, if you have it on your phone,
oh, that's good.
You can figure it out.
You can pull it up.
Yeah, I have people who laminate it and will hang it in their shower because they're like, I think a lot in the shower, so now
Whoa.
I just have it there to, put it everywhere. It's all over my house.
Whatever's clever, as the saying goes. So, I think just a couple thoughts here. One of the things I think as a pastor that I notice in the ministry that I do is that people often come and talk to me because they have feelings.
Yeah.
That's why they're in the office, right? So whether it be unforgiveness or hurt or pain or anger or you name it, what often we talk through is what to do with those feelings. And one of the things I love whenever I can is to point people back to the Bible as the epicenter of truth. So, anytime that I can let the Bible proclaim the Bible, I try to do so because you don't need to know what I think.
Yeah.
You need to know what God thinks.
Yeah.
And so when we think about, Jesus had feelings.
He did.
Fully human, fully God. He experienced everything that we experience. And this is mind-blowing, from bodily functions to exhaustion, to sweating, to crying. He had feelings, and there's a number of feelings that as I was just kind of preparing for this talk, just looking at some of the things that Jesus had feelings about. So, Jesus had exhaustion in his life constantly. It wasn't just because he was walking everywhere, right? He didn't roll up in a Bentley and have someone open a door. And he controlled all nature. He could have rode the most awesome horse in the land.
Yeah.
But he walked.
Yeah.
Because it made him relationally available, which we don't always want to think about with Jesus, but he did. The only time he rode was to fulfill the prophecy of the king coming into Jerusalem, crying Hosanna. So, it's interesting. He walked everywhere. He didn't have to, he chose to. He experienced exhaustion from that physically. He also had exhaustion from people spiritually and emotionally, which sometimes we feel guilty about as Christians. Oh, I shouldn't feel so exhausted. All they were doing is telling me all their problems for 20 hours. Yeah, you should. The master got exhausted.
Yeah.
At some point, he had to press the pause button. Like, y'all chill. I need to go, recoup for a minute, have some me time, and then I'll come back and talk about you tomorrow, right? I mean, every day for 3 years, it was like that. He had exhaustion. He had joy. He had joy in pleasing his Father and doing the Father's will. He knew anger.
Yep.
Anger at the hypocrisy of the religious leaders of his day. He had anger over their misinterpretation of the Torah and the heap and weight they cast on people's shoulders. He had sorrow. As he looked at the ravages of death and what sin did, he wept over Lazarus, who had died as his friend. I know this. He had disgust, real disgust, over greed, over racism, over oppression of the poor. He looked at those things and was disgusted by those things. Yeah. He had empathy for people who were in pain. He had compassion for people who struggled. He had frustration. This one I love because often that frustration was geared towards his disciples.
Yeah.
He often called them slow learners. And he would say crazy stuff like, how long do I have to be with you?
Right.
Dang, that's a crazy thing to say.
I mean, when we read that, we don't read it with any emphasis. But when you say it and it's like...
Yeah, this is a real human moment where Thomas is like, Lord, we don't know how to get to heaven. And Jesus, head shake, face palm emoji, like, bro, I told you 3 times, I'm the way, the truth, and life. No one gets to the Father but through me. How do you say you don't know where I'm going? I've told you where I'm going. He's like, no. And then after Pentecost, they become knowing, right? So, but I love that Jesus got frustrated because as a pastor, I'll be honest, I get frustrated with people. I get frustrated with myself. I get frustrated with all kinds of things. And to know that the master got frustrated gives me courage to also recognize that it doesn't mean I'm a terrible pastor.
Right.
Doesn't mean I'm a bad Christian. Doesn't mean you're a bad counselor if you get frustrated.
Right.
When you've told somebody something wise that's scripturally focused and they consistently do the opposite, it's okay to be like, dude.
Yeah.
Come on, man. How many times are we going to shoot ourselves in the foot here?
Right. It's looking at what did he do in that frustration? Did he give up on him and walk away and be like, idiots, done?
Not forever. Maybe for a moment. Maybe for a moment he needed to get up and walk away. I don't know if he said idiots, but I think he said done. But to your point, he came back. He didn't abandon them.
He didn't.
Right? He tarried with them.
He didn't sin in his frustration.
No. He was angry but did not sin.
Yeah, he didn't go check out. He didn't go numb it.
Right.
He felt it. He thought about it.
He had boundaries.
Which
we talked about in the second session, I think it was, of the podcast. Talked about boundaries. Jesus had boundaries. And so all this to say is that feelings, are very scriptural. Jesus had feelings. And so if you're ever curious to know what to do in a moment when you have some of the emotions that I mentioned, there are scriptural examples you can go back to and say, okay, I can look at Jesus, who is the absolute epitome of perfectly handling his emotions. He never messed this up. He never didn't do it in the way that honored God. He did it with the highest mark possible. So he is our standard. He is our guide. He's our goal.
Yeah.
So we can look at him in these moments of exhaustion and say, okay, Jesus was exhausted physically. What did he do? Well, he sat down, he rested.
Right.
He went to the well, and the Samaritan woman, he said, hey, can I have a drink of water? Now, again, he had an alternative motive for being there. He tells us the motive was to bring the gospel to this woman and through her to her village.
Yeah.
At the same point, it models that, like, when he was thirsty, he wouldn't just, like, power through and be like, I don't know, just keep going until I die.
Yeah.
No, he, like, stopped in his physical exhaustion. He did something wise about it. And in the same way, in his spiritual exhaustion, he had holy habits that placed him in a place that actually replenished him, which we're going to talk about more in the next episode of There We Said It. But so how would you, as you think about this in your practice, as you think about this in your life, how do you value and validate other people's feelings?
Yeah.
Knowing that feelings are real, but that doesn't always mean their feelings are true.
Right. It's the saying, like one saying I love, it's not mine, I got it from someone else, is that your feelings can ride, but they can't drive. Meaning our feelings are valid. They can be a part of us. They're allowed to be a part of us, but they're not allowed to control us, to dictate what we do. And so it is very important to make sure that someone who's talking to you about their feelings, that you value those and that you validate them. Validating them does not mean you're saying you're right.
Or I agree with you.
Yeah.
So how do you do that? Give me a game time situation. Like, what would that sound like? Because I was thinking about this like practically. Like, there's the clinical and then there's like the practical. So let me give you a scenario. Okay, let's say that one of your girlfriends calls you up and, oh, Carolyn, I'm so upset. My mother-in-law, didn't call me back today, and she said she was going to call me back. And, this woman always doing what she says she's going to do and never does it. Like, how do you enter into that as a friend? This is kind of a silly situation, but there might be someone listening like, dang, man, you're speaking to me right now. Like,
how'd you know I called someone this week? No.
God's speaking, you trust me. We do this. So how would you respond to that?
At first, the empathy, like, oh, man, I'm sorry. Like, that's a bummer. Like, and I want to know exactly how they're feeling. Like, how's that making you feel? Right? Like, let's bring out the emotion. Well, I feel like she doesn't love me. I feel like this. I feel like those are rough. Like, that must feel terrible.
Okay.
Because you want to acknowledge that feeling does feel terrible to them. It might not be right, but in the moment, it does not feel good to them. And then you want to be like, well, let's think about that. Like, does your mother-in-law really not love you? No, I know she loves me. Okay. So, like, we don't need to feel unloved by her right now.
Right.
Let's think about that. Do you think there's a reason why she didn't call you back? Like, has she been busy lately? Is she going through something?
Right.
Did you tell her it was really important?
Sure.
And it's like, well, no, I just said whenever she has time.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
so
sometimes we don't think about it.
Yeah, you're like a bomb diffuser, man. That was awesome. You were going through and like clipping all the right wires, and nothing blew up.
I have to do this to myself too, by the way.
Ditto.
I have this conversation in my own head daily.
I get it, and as you're saying this, I'm smiling because it's like I feel like she's in my brain right now. So the way that you validated their feelings was to simply acknowledge that they're real. That's what you did in the beginning of that. Like, hey, that stinks. I'm sorry.
They're real to them.
Nobody likes to not get a phone call back. Like, I totally understand that. That's validation. That's like, I hear you. Doesn't mean I think you. I don't think I've discovered enough to validate that this is the right feeling or not.
Right.
But we're going to ask some more questions.
Right.
And that's what you did. They were loving. They were simple. They were reasonable and rational questions. They weren't like high, deep psychological thoughts. it was just, hey, like, did you tell her what time to call? No, I didn't. Okay, then you're feeling this pain,
Yeah.
but you never express the standard to which you're gonna gauge if you have the right to be angry or not.
Right.
So that's super smart.
Yeah.
That's how that looks like. So when we talk about how do you validate other people's feelings, that's a great example that Caroline just gave about acknowledging their feelings are real, but then asking some follow-up questions to help them determine if they're true.
Yeah.
Right? So that's really good. Okay, so let me ask another question. How would you encourage people, especially men, to get in touch with their feelings?
Men are so scared of their feelings. Why is that?
Well, I can say this honestly. I am thankful that I am not a man that's scared of my feelings.
Okay.
I am in touch with my feelings, and I felt like from a very young age, I've always been okay with feeling feels. Mm-hmm. However, I've seen in my grandfather, I saw in my father, who were both byproducts of their own generation. My grandfather's that World War II generation. My dad was this boomer generation. You tend to live what you received. And so my grandfather received a very stoic, men don't show emotions. We show love by providing protection and resource for our family. And if they can't come to that understanding, then it's their fault.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of hurt wives and broken marriages because these men don't know how to communicate. And when they do it in the wrong way because the snake comes out of the can, to your point. And it always comes out ugly. And so then my dad inherited that from his dad. And then for whatever reason, like it seems like every few generations there becomes this tipping point where the generation that exists looks back on the generation that were and said, I don't think we need to do it that way anymore.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's healthy. I don't think that's good. And so there was something in me that recognized what they were passing on to me was not the best. It wasn't the whole story. So I kind of had that sense that feelings matter and have been in fairly good touch with them. I do think, though, in general, men don't show their feelings because they operate under that generational lie.
Right.
Some man, some woman, somebody somewhere told them their feelings are best left unexpressed. Feelings are for children and feelings are for ladies. Yeah. And so don't be...
It's a sign of weakness.
It often is. Don't cry. Don't be sorrowful. Don't let people know how you're feeling.
Yeah.
And I think that does so many broken things to the human soul, but to our culture, because God didn't say repress your feelings.
Right. God didn't repress feelings.
God didn't repress his feelings. So if that notion of, okay, just be quiet, repress your feelings and don't talk about it and be emotionless doesn't come from God, then you have to ask yourself, where does that come from?
Yeah.
And I would submit to you that comes from the evil one. That comes from the enemy who wants to rob, steal, kill, and destroy. He wants to damage you, and he wants to damage people. And the great way to do that is to get men to believe this narrative that I'm being the best man possible if I have the least amount of emotions as possible. And that's simply not true.
Right. Right. Because so going back to that whole, it's a sign of weakness. I have two things to say to that. For one, Jesus felt emotions and no one would ever call him weak.
No.
Right. And for two, if you feel like it's a sign of weakness, well, guess what? The Bible says that in our weakness, he is strong. So if we're never weak, how do we allow him to be strong in our lives?
Right.
And so I would just say for men, first of all, it is not a sign of weakness. I know every woman out there is it is so the opposite of that for us. If you can be vulnerable, if you can show us your emotions, that emotional intimacy, especially in a marriage, that connection is amazing.
Yeah.
And so needed for a strong marriage. And I would say just jump in and do it. Yeah, it's going to be scary. Yes, it's going to be hard at first, but I've never had a man come back to me and with this feelings bowl crumpled up and been yeah, that didn't work for me. It's always the exact opposite of well, I didn't know there was so much underneath of there.
Takes humility, takes trust.
Yeah. Because you're right. If you're not doing it, it is a sign of pride.
Yeah.
I don't need this. No, we all need to be able to identify and process our emotions to be healthy people.
For sure.
in healthy relationships.
Yep. And I think when men repress their feelings, it does something that actually hurts not just them, but their family. Like I was thinking about the season that I've been in, this, just the tragedy of losing my dad so abruptly and the feelings that brought out, right? So I had an option of putting on a good face, sucking it up, getting back into some sense of normalcy, not showing people how I feel. That would be option one, and that would be disingenuous to the moment, but also to what I was really feeling. Instead, chose option two, which was to be okay with not being okay, to recognize that this is a tragedy of epic proportion that nobody's prepared to deal with, and even with training and understanding, like it just hit me in a way, and I think other people, it just hit like hundreds of other people, this deep like pain of sorrow. And in that, they came to my aid. They came to pray for me. They came to send me notes and cards. Some people financially stepped up to help us fly back to Michigan because that was an unexpected cost, and it was very costly. And they basically told us, like, you're going to take this money, and we're not taking no for an answer because they're like, we love you.
Yeah.
And so if I would have put on this brave, I got it face, not only would it have been disingenuous, it would have robbed me of these blessings that God's people got to participate in, that in turn actually blessed their soul.
Right. You would have robbed them.
I would have robbed them. It's not just like, oh, I missed out. Like, no, they missed out.
Yeah.
Because of me hiding. And so I think, as we talk about like jumping in, guys, if you're listening, or ladies, if you're thinking about this as your man, I would say that some of this is so deeply entrenched, it may take a coach. It may take someone to walk you out of your bad hitting cycles.
Right.
And so, certainly finding your pastor, talk with them, say, hey, I'm a man who wants to just understand how to better express my feelings to my wife or to my kids, or you name it. It may take an additional step because you just don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And we're here to help. You can always message us.
Right.
Carolyn and I are here to help you. Of course, there's great practices like Downey Park and great churches like Calvary in Ripon that can help you.
Yeah.
But just two of many. Okay, so let me ask one more question as we start to wrap this up. How do we best show our true feelings? Now, this is not just men, but it certainly encompasses men. How do we best show our true feelings to our spouse, to our kids, to our family, and to ourselves? How do we best show our emotion to those, what I think are probably the four core rings of social interaction that we're going to have? Spouse, kids, our family, like our family outside, so like our moms, dads, sisters, brothers, and then of course as we look in the mirror, to ourselves.
Right. Well, I'm going to keep going back to the feelings, Will, because honestly, you can't. The best, healthiest way to express feelings is to first, in your own heart and mind, identify them, process them, and check the script.
Okay.
Right? Because it's not going to be healthy for me to sit in my emotions myself if they're emotions I don't need to have, if I'm believing a lie that the enemy's put there. It's not going to be healthy in my marriage if I'm throwing out emotions that are based on lies in my head.
Yeah, they're unqualified.
Right. So first that's the best thing to do. Identify, process, check the script on it.
Okay.
And get it down to what are the real emotions that need to be shared. Mm-hmm. Right? Because again, our feelings can ride, but they can't drive. Yeah. Doesn't mean we have to share every feeling and emotion with other people.
Right.
And that's part of the protecting, or like even like Chris talked about last week, the relationship with ourselves. Some of those emotions are just for us, that we can deal with them in our own hearts.
Yeah.
And then if we need to share them, I mean, happy emotions, of course, share them. We want to share happy. We want to spread that.
Yeah.
The negative emotions, if you've already processed through them in your mind and you know it's something that needs to come out, it's not going to come out as something attacking when you talk to that person. It's going to be a healthy conversation.
If you've had a chance to process
it. Because you're not going to come at them and be like, you make me feel this way, and then you're attacking them personally.
Right.
But instead coming and saying, hey, when you said this, when you did this, it caused me to feel this way.
Okay, so you just took my last thing. That was my thing. Okay, so we're
You asked the question
we're
to
gonna
me.
we're gonna say, okay, because great minds think alike. So I think to sum all that up, it really comes down to two really important action steps as you're processing. Right, what am I feeling right now and why?
Yep.
Massive step forward in self-awareness. Like if you want to become a more mature you, start asking that question and leave space for the Holy Spirit to give you an answer,
Yep.
right? What am I feeling right now and why?
Yeah.
And then the second, you just touched on it, is what we would call an I message.
Yeah.
Which I use in my premarital counseling all the time. And usually people say, an I message, like you mean like you look at them with your eyes and like they interpret what you mean by your eyebrow gestures. It's like, no,
I thought it was something had to do with the iPhone.
No, none of that. So an I message is when you do blank, I feel blank. Mm-hmm. And that sounds so scripted, and I'll tell you, it can feel that way, but there is good reason to have well-formed sentences that point us to good outcomes.
Right.
Like when you do blank, I feel blank. So the way that this sounds in practice is, it might be in the home between a husband and wife. And a husband might say, "Hey, what's for dinner tonight?" And the wife might say, "Oh, I'm making blank." And the husband rolls his eyes.
Yeah.
He doesn't say anything, but he rolls his eyes.
Bad move,
right?
husband.
Yeah, bad move, not a good move. Nonverbal communication. She
Right.
sees it, and she feels something.
Yeah.
She feels anger. She feels sad. Whatever it is, and so now she has an opportunity in a moment. This happens fairly quickly. To say, "What am I feeling right now? Why?" Right? She's like, "Okay, I'm feeling anger. I saw that eye roll. I know what that means, but maybe I don't know what it means."
Right.
Good self-awareness,
Right.
right? Maturity. Okay, so now I'm going to communicate this in a healthy way to my husband, not blow up like, "I saw that eye roll, you make your own dinner, fool." Like, no, maybe there's something better there for both of you. And it's, honey, when I asked you asked me what was for dinner and I told you, I noticed you rolled your eyes.
Yeah.
And when you rolled your eyes, I felt disrespected. I felt like I spent all this time making this awesome dinner, thought you were going to be happy, and your emotional, like your body cues told me that you weren't happy. Mm-hmm. Am I right? Am I close? Is that what took place? And now the husband has to be honest, like, no, honey, like,
I had dirt in my eyes.
I'm
was trying to
sorry.
roll it out.
Don't lie, right? Because
Right.
this is best when we actually are truth-filled. But he might say, yeah, listen, I thought something else was for dinner. And when you told me what it was, it frustrated me because I had my heart set on something else.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean I don't like what you made. It just means that I had a different expectation. I'm sorry I hurt your feelings. It wasn't intended. That's a massively mature adult moment right there. Like,
Right.
you can put a check by adulting.
Yeah.
If you have this moment and you can high five and be like, "Man, we just robbed the enemy of
Yes.
something that could have been a fight for the next
Exactly.
week over something dumb
Exactly.
that was meant, like, truly the action of making the food was meant in love. The reaction of disappointment had nothing to do with the action of love. It had to do with the reaction to
Right.
something that didn't manifest.
Right.
And Satan takes that whole thing and stirs that into a
Yeah.
conflict of you against her and her against you. And, the ugly comes out.
Yeah.
So this is
It
adulting.
Because so here's the thing. It's not and we do that because it's the action, again, making us feel away, not the person.
Right.
You still love that person. You still, as a person, you want to be with them. And you can even say that, like, this is no reflection of you as a person. This action, I'm taking this action, I'm putting it over here, and this is just what we're dealing with. Not you as a whole. I'm not saying you made a mistake as a whole person.
Yeah.
I'm just saying this is the action, and let's just focus on that.
So to sum it up, I would say from the heart of this talk, it's that feelings are real.
Yep.
They matter. And what you do with them really matters. Yeah. We can look to the Bible and we can look to the life of Jesus as the greatest example of how to deal with very common human emotions that happen. Of course, you're going to have to read the scripture to see for yourself how the master handled those moments and to take note of them and to seek his strength to apply them in your life. And that as we continue to ask questions of ourselves and of others, as we ask the questions, what am I feeling right now and why? And to communicate those feelings in a healthy way using iMessages or other vehicles like them to say, when you do blank, I feel blank. It helps us rob the enemy of the arrows that he would use to shoot at us, to bring division, and to try to bring a false sense of virtue to unverified feelings. And so that's what we know. And there we said it.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode. If you want to stay informed about our podcast, you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Search for There We Said It. And if you like what you hear, do us a favor and like, subscribe, leave comments, and all the places that you can find us. And if you ever have any questions, please reach out to us at contact@therewesaiditpodcast.com. We'd love to chat with you more there.